It's that point in the semester where we need to start making some final design decisions. Here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to review some WordPress features that we haven't yet talked about in the class. That includes talking about widgets as well as blocks. And then we're going to talk about our punch list, and I'll tell you what that is in just a moment. It's worth noting as we get started that as I talk about widgets and blocks and the punch lists, I'm actually making this video both for my 200 version of this class and my 300 version of this class. So if you want to get a more specialized version of this lecture, you should watch the Zoom recording or attend the class live. So what's a widget? A widget is basically a little box of content. And it's something that you can place in various locations throughout your website, typically your sidebars, your footers, and occasionally your header. There's two kinds of widgets I want you to have in mind, default widgets and specialized widgets. Let's start with default. So these are the default widgets that you'll see in any WordPress installation. There's a ton. To get a sense of what they do, you can obviously read the little description under each one, or you can pull in the drop-down menu and sort of explore it. Let's give an example. I often use the text widget. It's the easiest one. You just put in some text and possibly some hyperlinks. The most obvious place where I use it is on my course website. And if you look at the syllabus for either the 200 or 300 version of this class, you'll see that I have a sidebar widget that's a text widget. It's basically a bunch of links. You can see it there in the purple box. How did I do this? In the dashboard editor, I go to widgets, and then I find the text widget, which is sort of at the bottom of the screen. You can't quite see it, and I pull it up into the little spot that says primary sidebar. Now, depending on what theme you're in WordPress, you're going to see different options about where you can put a widget. So in this particular theme that I use for my course website, there are some footer widgets, and there is a sidebar or two. So I say that I'm putting it in the sidebar widget. If you click on that little box, you can see what I did. It opens up like a little text editor, and that's where I put in the links for the 200 version of the class and the 300 version of the class, and clicked Save. So I mentioned default widgets, but there's also specialized widgets. So these are the specialized widgets. Really what you need to understand here is these widgets are ones that may or may not appear. It depends what theme you have. So my course website is built on a theme called Virtue. And so you'll see there's a bunch of widgets there that say Virtue : something. So these are special widgets just for people who are using the Virtue theme. There's one other widget here. This is not associated with Virtue theme. It is one that got installed when I installed a plugin that allows me to create forms on my website. So that's another way in which you might get a specialized widget. Let's give an example here. So this is one of the templates that I use in the 200 version of my class called Jane Doe. And one thing you'll notice is that there are 4 spots in the bottom of this website, basically 4 footer widget locations. You don't have to use all of them in this theme, but there's 4 options. And in this particular example, I have used all 4. The bio is a text widget like the one I showed you before. And on the right-hand side, you see I put in the Wesleyan logo, and this was done using the image widget. So again, text and image. But there's also these 2 widgets in the middle, and these are specialized widgets that only came with this theme. So going back, you see that this is the Virtue theme that I'm using, and there's a little widget for a contact form, and there is also one for an image grid. And if I back up, you'll see that's what I have there, contact information and this little image grid. So those are specific to that particular theme, and they're in the footer this time versus the sidebar, which is what I showed you originally with my course website. Now let's also talk for a second about blocks. So think of blocks as the components of an individual post or website. So if widgets are things that are more specific to the entire website, blocks are how you edit individual posts and pages. These components could be content components, but some of them are also formatting. So here I'm in edit mode. I've basically pretended that I'm creating a new page in WordPress. And you'll see there's a little circle with a plus sign in it at the top of the page. And if I click on that, what happens is a menu pops up that lists all the blocks that are available to me. WordPress tends to default to the most used blocks. So whatever blocks you've been using the most are often the ones that come up here. I want to point out a few things if we look at these ones in the pink box. Stuff like the paragraph, the cover, and the image, some of these I'll come back to in a second, these are default blocks. They're always there no matter what WordPress theme you have. Just like with widgets, there are a few blocks here that are only appearing because of the particular theme that I'm using, which again, for my course website is Virtue. So those particular blocks are very specific to Virtue. They allow me to do a couple of things that you can't do in other themes. So I want to focus on two of these blocks. One of them is the cover block. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. So for the virtual class plan that I made for this course for January through April 2020, when we had to move our courses online, I used a cover photo. It's this this photo that we see at the top. It sort of gets grayed out when you use the cover option, but I just uploaded it to my media library and set it as the cover. And you can write text over it. So you can see there I have what's often called the hero message, and it says, "We can do this." So that's one particular block that you might want to think about using. There's also the image block, which you should be using a lot. So many people will choose to put various kinds of images in their posts for various reasons. In the 200 version of this class, it's because you want to include artifacts in your posts. In the 300 version, you might have a variety of reasons why you might want to use an image. There's a few things I want to point out about the image block. One is that when you insert an image in the post or page, you are allowed to use a caption, as you see in the bottom there. And you can also put in what's called alternative text. I say you could put this in. I would argue that you should always put this in. Here's the distinction. The caption is exactly what you always think a caption is. It may or may not directly describe what's in the photo. It might be something that's just giving you general context about the photo. The alternative text should absolutely describe exactly what's in the photo, because the alternative text is intended for individuals who are blind who are using a screen reader to navigate your website. And so if there's no alternative text, they can't tell what the photo is. You should always fill this out so that your website is more accessible for those users. One other thing, and this is an important one that I want to point out about the image block. If you click on the image in the top left, you will see a little link icon. This is how you can add hyperlinks to things. And if you click on it in regards to an image, a menu will appear. And I would recommend for many of you that you want to click on Media File. And what this means is that when the website is live, someone can look at the image, and they can also click on the image and a larger version of it will appear. There's many instances where you don't need to do that, but if you have an image that's hard to read, you might want to give the user the ability to expand the image. So for instance, if you had an artifact, you wanted to show like how you program in a particular language, the picture might not look very clear on the screen until the user can click on it and open it and get a larger version of it. So consider doing that if you have photos for which that makes sense. There are so many blocks out there. I just screenshotted and threw a few here, and they do a lot of different things. These ones on the left side are often about adding in certain kinds of content. So maybe you don't want to, if you're in the 200 version of this class, do include an entire paper that you wrote, but maybe you want to include just a few quotes from that paper. In the other version of this class, you might have a video that you want to include or some audio and so forth. There are also blocks that have to do with formatting your page, so having 3 columns or 2 columns or having a button. And there's also a bunch of blocks that are called embed blocks, and these are ones that allow you to embed things from other services like Spotify and YouTube and SoundCloud. So please explore these and think about the ways to make your website not necessarily completely cluttered, but more dynamic than an academic paper. One other thing I want to talk to you about as we're moving into the kind of finalization of design is what's called the punch list. The punch list idea really comes from construction. So if you were building a house from scratch and you have a construction crew that's working on it, towards the end of the building process, usually what's created is a punch list, and it's those lists of things that still need to be done that the construction crew needs to make sure they complete before they hand off the certificate of occupancy to the new owner. This could include things like scratches on paint that need to be touched up. It could be there's some doorknobs that need to be screwed in and so forth. So it's often these final touches, and they're ones that are easy to miss unless you're kind of really looking carefully. So what happens in both of my classes is I try to make a punch list for everyone's website as I look at the websites to say, hey, here's something that you could improve upon, here's something you need to fix, here's something you probably didn't catch. And I will be doing that for this semester. And you should be looking at that punch list and trying to resolve as many of those issues as possible. Just to give you an example from the previous semester, this is the punch list I created. It was in a Google Sheet. Basically what I do is I have one gigantic Google Sheet for each class, and then every student in the class has a worksheet within that sheet with their punch list. And here's what it looked like when my student was going through and checking off the things that she had done. So you should expect, as we move through the final weeks of the semester, that I will do this for you too. And this is important because as I will be reminding all students in the next week, you are going to have some external reviewers looking at your site. So these are people who are not part of our class, they work at Wesleyan, who are going to come in and look at the site, and you want to deliver the best impression possible to those reviewers. So really, there's only one thing I want you to do for this week, and it really involves you making progress on your website. All the content for your website should be uploaded, and you should be working on straightening out your navigation bar. And the 200 version of this class, this means making sure that you have your categories at the top, and the 300 level version of this class, that probably means something different. All individual posts and pages that you might have should be in and look nice, and you might perfect them by using some of the blocks I just told you about. You should be paying attention to your header and footer and whether you want any widgets there. And you should be focusing on design elements that we covered at other points in the course, like the font, the colors, the background, and so forth. You should also review your punch list when it becomes available, and I'll let you know when it is. That's all I've got. Thank you so much.